everybody, Steve Elkin Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we are continuing our discussion on managing emotions. And we started to touch upon lust last time around, so it's not a big one to be discussing, but let me kind of just bring a couple of things to your attention. Lust is the hallmark emotion we associate with power stress. If you're doing the most basic level of training in tension management. We've talked about the different emotions and all that. Lust is an interesting emotion because on the one hand it's unresourceful, and on the other hand it's resourceful. So it's in the middle. It's a blend. It's unresourceful if whatever it is you're lusting after is absolutely unrealistic for you to achieve, because again, lust is the wanting of something, but simultaneously with a desire to have it is a question mark about whether or not you can or will or should have whatever it is that you really want. So lots of people covet things that are not in their own best interest, or lots of people are on a quest to achieve something that simply isn't in the realm of possibilities for them. Nevertheless, there's this desperate drive, desperate desire to have whatever that object happens to be. So it is resourceful because it is something that focuses your attention on something. But again, because you're in this middle, hopefully what you're focusing on is something that's actually in your best interest, and actually something that isn't going to be a complete and total waste of time and energy and other resources to actually get it. So that's where we say lust is the hallmark emotion associated with power stress. Remember, power stress also has a level of urgency associated with it. And so not only do I want it now. But we say the dark side of power stress is this impulsiveness. And so again, we have to look back at what's driving this desire to actually be happening. Now we'll talk about the other levels of tension and how want appears, a different level of desire, but the lust is here. Now, if you were to look at the adjective map in this particular area of the change grid, so this driven expressive and this expressive driver, you would find some words that might bring a little bit of a smile to your face. So these two levels of energy are the levels of energy where romance comes into play, schmoozing the deal, being very flirtatious, all those kinds of things that we do in order to put a spotlight on another person so that we can kind of make them feel special for whatever our motives happen to be. So there's a lot of stuff that happens here. A lot of that behavior is not necessarily calculated. So remember I said that, and this is long ago in your training, I said that there's a pattern in human behavior that we have recognized that occurs in this particular area of the change grid. It occurs whenever you're in a situation where you view your ability as being moderate, but the challenge is being quite high. So what do humans often turn to as a way of compensating for whatever lack of ability they have, or they believe they have, given a particular level of challenge? And the answer is this is where people turn on the charm. So this is where all of those social skills, talk about emotional intelligence, this is where that emotional intelligence is probably being very much put to the test. So even though I've said that lust is not limited to romantic or sexual sorts of desires, make no mistake about it. Those kinds of desires still fall in the category of lust, and they are still things that people will actively pursue. Even if we look at the two larger levels of tension, we got the driver energy and the expressive energy. Well, when you put that driver and expressive energy together, you end up with a high degree of social interaction with a strong intention. And so that's also happening here on the change grid. Apply that to a business deal, and the same dynamic is going to occur. How do you end up romancing the sale, schmoozing the deal, working the prospect? All those sorts of energies and behaviors are also happening here on the change grid. Questions, thoughts about about what I've just described there as far as lust in business versus lust in social interactions?
Love the word schmoozing. Haven't heard it for a long time.
Yeah, schmoozing. Yeah, we schmooze the deal. It's probably a word from Yiddish. I'll bet if we really talk to some of our Jewish friends who speak Yiddish, they'd probably tell us that schmooze is in there somewhere in the vocabulary. But yeah, schmoozing the deal.
It's an interesting thing to me about lust is the processes of it. It's a battle in the mind, like
Hmm.
in the brain. If you look at the processes that, because it the reasons that are associated with lust are often the reward centers of the brain,
Yes.
uh, the sensory interpretation, and even visual processing, right? So it enlists the amygdala, the hypothalamus, all these
Hmm.
areas that deal with like the emotional information, but also stimulates like reward processing, the ventral stratum.
Yes.
And so the prefrontal cortex, the medial prefrontal cortex, is also part of lust. And that's just
Hmm.
behind the forehead where we shape this awareness of self. So you have kind of this yin and yang thing going on that needs to be mediated, but you use the key word in that description of the sense of urgency.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So it
Yep.
tends to happen in the moment, but without any kind of uh, capacity to mediate,
Yes.
there's no bridging the gap. So then you're just left to, whatever the lust says that I should be lusting for without any, kind of way of filtering it.
Well, and then add to that that there's a primal drive that's happening in this area, the change grid as well. So this drive to procreate is also happening there, to find the partner, the worthy partner. And so if you look at other animal behavior, why do so many animals, particularly the male, have to put on such a show in order to hopefully attract the female partner?
Mhm.
So that mating can occur. Well, that whole mating ritual or whatever, although we like to think of ourselves as being more, intelligent and all less driven by instinct. Oh, I promise you, there are plenty of instinctual drives that are going on at the bar at closing time. So,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
all of that. So there is a drive that's going on. So the lust, there's you were talking about, a hormonally kind of driven drive there, but yeah, it's
yeah,
all going on. It's all part of this
exactly.
social dance that's
Yes.
happening. So, and by the way, keep in mind the reason why for so much animal behavior the male has to put on such a display is because it's highly competitive. And so
Hmm.
there is this belief in the male of those species, if not even our own, that there are that women are going to be highly selective in who their partners are going to be. They have very different drives and very different standards. And I forget who conducted the study that just said that women are extremely attracted to symmetry in a man's face and a man's body. And because the thought there is that symmetry represents strong genetic makeup, and strong genetic makeup bodes well for having healthy children. And so something is going on at a very primal kind of level in the selection process, et cetera. But regardless, that whole dance is happening right here on the change grid.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And of course, you can throw the neurotransmitters into play there, and now you've got all the endorphins that are happening. The guys are all puffing themselves up to be bigger and bolder. And I love watching some of the YouTube videos about. I think it's particularly birds and how the male of the species, can send out their plumage and all this astounding color and do their little dance and all that. Meanwhile, the females of the species look really quite indifferent to the whole thing.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and how fish, the male of the species, try to build the most beautiful nest they can. I forget the species of fish that builds these very elaborate geometric shaped potential nesting sites, so that the female will go, oh, that's very nice. Thank you for building that for me. Okay. Anyway, so all that's happening on and on and on. So lust, the wanting of whatever it happens to be, is definitely happening in this area. The change grids is a sense of urgency, is a bit of a question mark. There is a puzzle that needs to be solved. Remember, we say that anything that happens in the upper half of the change grid represents a puzzle in search of a solution, and so that dynamic is certainly in play as well.
Yeah.
So, how do we distinguish that desire from the desire that someone in the outgrid area has? So if I'm a driven driver, I definitely want something, but I'm not in this, chemically driven lust sort of, giant question mark puzzle to be solved. What's the difference between the the wanting of something upgrid versus the wanting? And by the way, I'm not even all the way upgrid. I'll get there sooner or later, but right now I've just been in this area of the change grid, the driven expressive driver. That's what we've been talking about. What if I'm a driven driver instead? How does the dynamic around their desire to have something differ?
Isn't outgrid more the external something that's driving you, as
It is more
opposed
of an
to
it's an internal choice to go after an external goal.
right? Because see, that's the interesting thing about this idea of lust and how the intensity of it and the situation matters. So it's really a full conscious sport, if you will.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah,
if
yeah.
you think about it, when we try to shut down a arousal, any kind of arousal, we're calling on regions of the brain, the right superior frontal gyrus and the right anterior cingulate gyrus.
Mm,
What those systems are our conscious self-regulatory system. So this network provides us with this evolutionary unprecedented ability to control our own processing. And that's something that we're supposed to be superior to, or capacity that makes us superior to all other creatures.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
But we don't use it because we don't understand it. We don't understand that when we're suffering from any of these emotions, we have to go from, I like that theory you at the Processing Institute, they say go from ego to thinking eco, like ecosystem.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Well, and so I wonder if that's what I was kind of thinking about here on the change grid. You see, the drive that people, sorry, the desire that people very far out grid have, is very intentional, very deliberate, very calculated.
Mhm.
These people have no question mark about whether or not they can and will have what they're looking for. Maybe they're deluding themselves, but they have no question mark involved. The people upgrade have a question mark because they believe they're in a competitive situation, et cetera, et cetera. But nope, these people believe that nothing is going to get in their way. They are wholly focused, entirely directed towards whatever the outcome they're really looking for. And if you're in their way, they have no hesitation to do whatever is necessary to get you out of their way. So that to me feels very different than the wanting of something that we found further upgrid. And just to finish it all off, the person who's in the upgrade danger zone desperately wants something, but whatever it is they want, they don't really even believe exists. I mean, they're in a life or death situation perhaps, and they are missing whatever it is they feel like they have. So they're waiting for the miracle. They really don't feel like they have any real role. So no amount of primping and preening and puffing oneself up is going to help you if you're in the upgrade danger zone. You need a whole different set of interventions up there. So do you want something? Yeah, but what you want is a miracle. The people who are in this driven driver, or scratch that, expressive driver or driven expressive, they believe that they have a good deal of what is necessary, again, moderate level of ability, but the competition is afoot. Well, the person who's in this outgrid danger zone believes that they can have whatever it is they want. They simply have to do whatever it is that's necessary to get it.
Mm.
So that's that whole driven driver kind of energy going on. So can you guys feel the difference between
Yeah.
So that's why I said these people aren't about lust. That's not what this is really all about. If you're a driven driver, um, again, I know I'm babbling, but my neck, I'm still dealing with my injury. So I'm not really thinking all that clearly. So you guys will have to help me sort it all out. But um, I don't know what word to describe it when we're saying like, no, this person does not lust after something as much as they have committed to going and getting it. They are sure that they can get it. There is no doubt that they are going to win whatever it is. Again, if we look at Olympic gold medalist performances, or any medal for that matter, these people don't lust after having the medal. These people know they are fully capable of getting it. And so they go and they do exactly what is necessary in order for them to earn that. At the same
Yeah.
time, they know the challenge is very high because they know they're up against other worthy competitors, and so they got to be very much on their game, because usually they don't lose because they didn't do something right. They lose because something interrupted their pattern. They missed something, over calculated or whatever. So a little
Yeah. They're
different thing.
very deliberate.
Very deliberate. And,
Yeah.
you know, the difference between getting a medal and not getting a medal in so many of these sports is fraction of a second, or one, little difference of a point, or whatever the
Right.
case may be. So that they do not underestimate the competition, but they know they have an extremely high level of ability. And as long as they can harness that ability, stay in the zone, they have a strong shot of getting the medal. Um, what do you
So
do when all of your worthy competitors are having equally great days?
right. So would that be the word just intention, or a certain level of intensity
Well,
with
see
the
now,
intention?
yeah, those words all appear right here. So if we say they're intentional, they're deliberate, they're calculating, those are all heartline
Okay.
descriptors. Now these gray lines, arc lines, these are about intensity. So there's a tremendous amount of intensity. In fact, people that are out here in power, rather in, in power, but outgrid in power, they're able to handle a certain level of intensity that is even greater than the level of intensity of someone in a life or death situation. And I know that's difficult to kind of wrap your head around until you realize the difference is that the people who are here on the change grid are walking into risk deliberately. They're choosing to step into the
Yeah.
big test.
Yeah.
But there's even a level of intensity that only the driven driver experiences. The outgrid danger zone driven driver would experience, and that's a level of intensity that the common, we mortals would.
Yeah, we don't get that part.
No.
This is interesting that you say that, because I was reading a recent sports medicine research, and they were talking about where you described the outgrid, that professional athletes don't do traditional goal setting, or what we would call goal setting. They're not focused on that. In fact, the sports psychologist said goal setting for professional athletes, for that's like for couch potatoes.
Yeah.
They're focused on very deliberate things. They're doing things to get results and feedback so that they can
Hmm.
level up and always, what he called RTB, raise the bar
Grazing
on
the
what
bar.
it is that they're doing. Now, that isn't managed adequately or effectively, then they end up in the danger zones. But they're
Yeah.
doing things very deliberate.
Very deliberate. And, this, which you've just named as an upgrade maneuver, raising the bar is increasing the standards against which one is measuring their performance. That bar has to be kept sufficiently high in order for to get someone engaged and keep them engaged. And so I've always described the kind of coaching that I do as performance coaching. Performance coaching is not really so much about mindset, although your mindset does come into play. There is an assumption in performance coaching that your mindset is already in a healthy place. And now what you are looking at is an opportunity to fine tune. And so the whole mechanism of performance coaching is to make sure that there is a match between the perceived level of challenge and the actual level of ability. And as that success occurs, we want to boost the perceived level of challenge to put that actual level of ability to test again. And you're going to do that over and over and over again until actual ability fails to meet the perceived challenge.
Mm.
Once actual ability fails to meet the perceived challenge, now we're in a place of performance coaching where we can say, you've just failed in your performance. That means there was something that was done or not done that needs to be done differently. Can we identify what that is? Because it could be something as simple, talking about Olympic performance, as a position of a leg, as a position of your head, as the shape of your hand as it's moving through the water. So this is what we're talking about when we're this far out, we're doing that kind of coaching. What is the absolute finest level of detail we can break a behavior into that will end up changing the outcome? Because that's what we're looking for, that fine level of skill enhancement. And we can apply that to sales performance, to leadership performance, to let's say you're in a competitive speaking environment. It could be as simple as a gesture being added at the right time, a facial expression at the right time, a pause that's a little bit longer, or movement that's a little bit more quick. This is the fine tuning. My personal trainer is a competitive bodybuilder, and he has been talking recently that the whole world of posing is far, far, far more challenging than anyone would ever imagine it could possibly be, and far more exhausting than most aerobic workouts, because it's all about the slightest shift in an angle that you're holding your body at during a particular pose that will catch the light in just the right way that'll make you look more or less whatever you're trying to look more or less of. And so that to me is what Brian's talking about, this super, super fine tuning that occurs right there, renegotiating 10-10, or rather redefining 10-10 over and over and over again without moving someone into a danger zone. Well, that was a long explanation, but there you go.
That was
But
good.
I think Simone Biles is a good example of where
Yeah.
we assumed the mindset was good. She was totally dependent all these years. Her past history
Oh
and
yeah.
abandonment, and her achievement was, that's why she was loved. She even said, with the outpouring of support, I realize now that my gymnastics and my achievements, that I'm more than that. She never realized that, and that is why she's sitting out. That should have been dealt with. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think she's a perfect example. The other thing with Finke or whatever, the swimmer, he
Yeah.
was never in the running in the last few seconds. Talk about turning it on. It was apparently it was history making. He came out of the dust and took it. And so, adrenaline, whatever, what is I mean, something happened because he went into turbocharge
That's right. And it may
and
very well
took
be,
it.
talking about mindset again, the whole thought about performance coaching is that the mindset needs to be in the right place before performance
Mhm.
coaching can actually
Exactly.
begin. And so because that means what that also means is that no matter how strong the performance coaching has been, the mindset can undermine it, or maybe, just maybe, you're talking about that swimmer, maybe his performance coaching was really, really good, and at the last minute he really turned on the mindset, and that allowed him to exercise what he had been conditioned to do in the performance coaching even more effectively.
So in
Um,
your experience, where do you think businesses are missing the mark here? Is it the lack of
no,
awareness of the two, or is it lack awareness of their own and then how to manage others? Because it seems like
yeah,
there's a great disconnect.
no, I can tell you exactly what the reason is that it's easy to give someone a leader title or a manager title, but the job of leading and managing is extremely difficult.
Hmm.
And most people have never been trained to do that work properly. You know, we just promote people because we promote people. But what I've just described, performance coaching is applied to a business setting. Imagine the
Hmm.
workload that puts on a manager about constantly coaching an individual to push themselves to a point of failure and then enhance their ability. So you know where you're working. You know, unless you fail, I don't know where you need the additional performance training. So this is why we're talking about I have to constantly raise the bar, raise the bar, raise the bar until you fail. Once you fail, now I know where I need to start working more on your ability to do something. Otherwise, we could be exercising what you happen to be doing quite easily, quite routinely. And
But
what's the
aren't there tools to help them? You think about like these so-called
oh yeah,
performance reviews and these kinds of things are
mm,
supposed to be tools, but they're
yeah.
they're used in the
Mm.
after effect, right? Like,
Traditional performance appraisal systems are more about historical performance based on
right,
recollection of recent sorts of things. You know, no, we're talking about coaching occurs in the moment, and it occurs every moment.
right,
Um,
right. So
that's
that's
what we're talking about when it comes to performance coaching. Um,
right,
and it's all about, you see me hovering right here at 1010. It's all about that spot. Well, because most organizations are poorly equipped to begin to provide any level of performance coaching. And by the way, the people who should be doing the performance coaching theoretically are too far upgrade because of other things. So they're not even in the mental position to be able to do this. They may not feel they have adequate time to do this, and they simply are lacking the skill. And so, but if we treated businesses the way that we treat top performing athletes, then each of those top performing athletes, or how do I do this? When you're talking about a really highly skilled performance coach, how many athletes can they work with at a time? You
mm,
know, what's the ratio between athlete and that level of coaching that's being provided? It's a handful at most,
right, yeah,
because how often do I need to be watching you? Well, you know, these athletes are in their respective gyms or doing their respective sport for hours upon hours a day, similar to a full day at work. And so I think that if you really wanted to apply this successfully in business, you'd have to have a special role of performance coach. And that performance coach would be working with your key performers all day, every day. They wouldn't have other things to distract them, other duties, other nonsense. They are your performance coach, and that's what they do. Um, so because that isn't present, you end up with mavericks. I mean, one of the things that a performance coach has to do is also keep an eye out for the people that are in the danger zone, because this is where injuries occur.
right.
This is where, you know, lots of stupid things get done.
But the professional athletes today, the key part of that is about the feedback, right? So like even when they finish performing, they can go look on their tablet and they can see,
Right.
they can replay the moment, and
That's
then they
right.
can use self-correction. So I'm thinking
That's
about
right.
that because my nephew like just recently got a management consulting job with McKinsey in Europe, right? So he had to survive like 9 interviews, all those things. But they have a specific strategy of growth on how they're going to
Hmm.
grow individuals. Like there's
Hmm.
a direct pipeline of leadership,
Yeah.
and you know where you are at each level. You're given a mentor, so he doesn't have to figure out, hey, what do I need to do to get to managing partner? He
Yeah.
knows exactly what he needs to do. They have these like one page dashboard things where they're keeping track of different milestones. They get feedback from their mentor all the time. It's a very deliberate
Yeah,
process.
absolutely. Well, and I can tell you from working with so many clients in Europe. Well, first of all, I'll tell you that what I'm about to say, there's a whole lot of companies I've worked with in Europe who apparently did not get this memo. But overall, there is a lot more, what do I say, progressive thinking in the field of personal growth and development among a lot of European companies. There's a handful in the U.S. who are really savvy around it, but it is not the normal way, the normal philosophy that governs business in the U.S. So, in many ways, I think that our European colleagues are ahead of us. But again, they've got plenty of clients they can name who did not get the memo,
Yeah.
and are continuing to behave in ways that are counterproductive.
Could the change grid be used in that way as some kind of
Yes,
dashboard to help people manage these states like in real time?
absolutely,
Like as they
absolutely.
engage in different tasks and they have like a
Well,
review process, or like in the medical
right, but
industry, we have a huddle, like, so we're reviewing the team play and individual play on how each one interacted with the patient.
yeah, but let's add to that not only for the sports scenario, the business scenario, but what about in a medical kind of a scenario? The truth is, there's no one who is more. There's no one who benefits more greatly from having a command of the change grid than the individual themselves.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so it's not like this is a tool for coaches and trainers and managers and consultants. I mean, yeah, it's a great tool for them. But first and foremost, it needs to be a tool of the individual. And the individual needs to develop a certain level of comfort and fluency in using the change grid in their own life. And as they get more and more comfortable with it, one of the things you'll find that they do is they stop lying to themselves
Mm,
because you can put yourself anywhere on the change grid you want, but when you're lying.
yeah.
So, once they turn to get the point of using this as a tool for actual reflection, then I think great things can happen from a performance coaching kind of a perspective. So, yeah.
Excellent.
Yep. All right. So again, we wanted to talk about the difference between lust and whatever this intentional, focused behavior is. I keep going out there in the danger zone that they do have a distorted reality, but right here at 1010, that level of wanting, it's almost more like the word I want to use is that it's not that it's a desire they have, it's a choice that they've made. And this choice sets into motion a whole set of behaviors that are designed to help the person reach that. Yes.
Could it be called an expectation at that point?
It's an expectation with zero wiggle room. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, we expect this to happen. No, we expect this to happen. so, so,
Well, that's what I meant. That's,
yeah.
it's an expectation.
It's an expectation. And it's an expectation the individual has set for themselves. I think that's really a good way to look at it. It's not the wanting of something; it's the expecting of something. I like that. That's good. Now we have to kind of work our way around these other things too. Does the person who is relatively downgraded want anything? And if they do, how is that wanting different than the wanting of being outgrid, or the wanting that happens here in Lustville, or the wanting we talked about upgrid? How is this wanting of something any different? If you're a downgrid person, what do you want?
I would think you already have it. Yes.
You already have it. I tend to be a downgrid person. I can tell exactly what I want. Anyone want to answer the question for me?
Well, it sounds like it's going to be a little bit egocentric. In other words, when you talk about wants for a person who's very downgrid, their scope of available interest is so broad
Mhm. Yep.
that, you know, it's almost going to be what strikes their fancy.
Right. And so 'cause my answer is going to be, I want to be left alone.
Right.
So, because I've got, as far as the wanting of things that one, needs or whatever, I'm okay, I'm fine. And I'm not out grid where I'm driven to be doing any, thing like that. When you're down grid, the wanting is to just let things be as they are. Leave situations alone. Remember that the being down grid, this area, the change grid, is where puzzles have been solved. Systems have been built, processes are in place, routines and habits have been formed. This is where strengths live. This is where mastery is approached, if not actually achieved. And so um, this is just a place where let it be. Everything's just fine. I just want things to be left alone. I want things to stay as they are, to remain unchanged. What's unrealistic about that desire?
And things change.
Things
Things
change.
change, right? And unfortunately, because you're too far down grid, do you notice and respond to these changes as quickly as might serve you well?
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
necessarily, because again, you have an assumption of control and an illusion of control. And so, yeah, I mean, I get it. If I speak my heart's truth, I spend a great deal of time energetically down grid where I just really want to be left alone. I mean, I think of myself as being mostly retired, but that's no reason not to go out there and do whatever you can do and try to continue to have some sort of positive impact on your own world and the world of others around you. So there's, find that new mission, find that new purpose. That whole upgrade maneuver part of dealing with people that are downgrid is that this area represents tremendous untapped potential. So find a new vision, find a new mission, find a new purpose, get re-engaged. These are the messages we try to get across to people that are downgrid.
Yeah. Really
But
salespeople with large books.
yeah,
That
right. Yep, yep, yep,
But
yep.
you're a person with great awareness. So is it that wouldn't it be different? Um, I don't know if intensity is the right word, but a different experience if the person was just completely like unaware. Because you're aware, so you understand that, okay, I know that there is different levels of mastery. Like I'm thinking
Yeah,
of in Japanese culture, they call it shokunin, which is the idea of being a master craftsman. And there's different levels of that. Like
yeah,
there's no end to it. Just like in martial arts, just because
yeah,
you get a black belt, there's no end to it, right?
right, right. Well, was it Simone Biles who was quoted recently as saying that we don't owe anybody a gold medal?
Mm,
I think that's what's happening down here as well. Could you
okay.
go to a whole new level? Could you take mastery to a whole new level? Yeah, but if you're this far downgrade, you don't owe anybody anything.
Right, right.
So if you're going
Gotcha.
to do it, you're going to do it because for whatever reason you've become more engaged. Like the what did you call that pursuit in Japanese?
Shikunin?
Yeah, that individual is not downgrid. They're
Okay.
they're here re-engaged. They're back in power where they're actively testing, how I talked again, performance coaching. They are finding their point of failure, finding the limit of what they can do. And then they're saying, like, I believe a higher standard is possible, but that higher standard can only be achieved if I advance my skills.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so they're re-engaged. So something happened that got them out of there.
I
Maybe it was
gotcha.
cultural, maybe whatever. But as long as you're this far downgrade, honestly, everything is just fine. Think about what power, apathy, and apathy sound like as their hallmark phrases. Power, apathy. I know, I know I need to do something. I just wish somebody else would do it. Or
Mm,
apathy. I know I need to do something. I don't need to do anything. Everything's just fine.
yeah.
And so
Yeah.
the wanting that occurs down here is more like, well, I'm fine. I don't really have want of anything. And on the one hand, that's great. On the other hand, you go like, well, doesn't it get boring?
Yeah. See, I was trained in the opposite where I can remember as early as 9 or 10, I've always heard this comment that there is no there to get to. And so I'm always thinking of the next thing and always learning and always, and so I can like, what is the term, shiny object syndrome when it comes to
Oh yeah,
learning things?
yeah, or the squirrel. Yeah,
Yeah,
if you're a
yeah,
dog,
yeah,
squirrel.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well, and I think that that's what's really happening a lot is, you know, obviously we live in over 55 community. Sun City West is this, you know, it's it's extremely good at doing what Sun City West and communities like it are intended to do. And that's to keep people very active and very engaged and very involved in whatever it is that they find interesting. So when you're talking about having 125 different clubs people can join and every single craft and pursuit of readily available to you, blah, 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 it's not at all surprising to hear people say here, if you live here and you're bored, that's your fault, because there's plenty to keep you. Nevertheless, I will tell you that the majority of people who live in a community like this never avail themselves of any of what the community has to offer. They just
Mhm.
don't. And so they're very far down grid. And so if you want a really lucrative coaching opportunity, start coaching people who live in an over 55 community about finding a new purpose, a new, you know, thing. Keep yourself active and vibrant and alive, and you'll be active, vibrant, and alive a lot longer than the people who end up slipping down grid and staying down grid. I
Mm.
mean, you know, at least I go work out with my trainer and he tolerates nothing. So yeah. Okay. So that's the wanting that is occurring down grid. I think that wanting, um, you can benefit from saying, well, are you this way on everything? Is there nothing that you want to accomplish? Now I'm trying to move them up and out. Is there nothing you really want to be working on? Is there nothing you find interesting? Nothing. And I do have a few little hobbies that that do engage me for a while. And then for whatever reason, I lose my energy around them, but I know that energy will come back. And then I'll do that. Like you guys know, I play the harp. Well, I can sometimes play the harp every single day and work on more difficult pieces and all that. And then for some reason, I'll stop playing for weeks, but I'll get back to it. So, you know, same thing for a lot of other things. That's the life of a downgrid person. Um, okay, how about
Do
ingrid?
you
Yeah,
think, T, I have to ask you,
yeah.
this is a personal question, so you don't, you know, you can ignore it. But so you're down grid, and that was what came to mind is, you know, people leave me alone.
Mhm.
And yet you developed a tool
Yeah.
that is all about maneuvering people to change. And
Mhm.
was that almost, do you think, part of the motivation, almost like self-healing? Because there is a
Mhm.
coincidence here that what I mean, you've accomplished a lot, you've been active, you've been busy.
Yeah.
When you really prefer to stay down grid, is there a correlation there of what motivated all of what you
Yeah,
said?
I don't really know because, you know, I started this when I was in my 20s, and so it's been a very long time because it would have to
Yeah,
really be something that was going on then that ended up triggering
yeah.
it. And back then, I think it was just something that was a little bit more practical. I needed work, and I
Oh,
knew I didn't work well with managers. I had even at a
mm,
young age, I thought most companies are run by idiots, and so it was not good for me to try to get so I knew I had to kind of do my own thing. So part of it
it,
was that. Um,
huh.
but I don't know. I mean, okay, Edie, you're a speaker. Do you like being on stage and delivering addresses to audiences?
I absolutely love it.
Okay,
I'm so energized by it.
yeah.
Yeah, it's healing for me.
See, I don't, and I never have.
Yeah,
But you put me in front of an audience, and do I do a decent job?
right.
Yeah, I do a really good job because, hey, it's showtime and I've got the skills, so I know how to do it.
Mhm.
But I've never had that passion around it. I find the ChangeGrid absolutely fascinating. I know that it can change people's lives, and it can certainly help people that do the kind of work that we all do to do it more effectively and more profitably and all that. So that's all really, really good. But if I said that I experience passion around the ChangeGrid, this isn't true.
But you love it. You love like the research and looking at these different human
Do I?
typological stuff. You
Do
said?
I? Do I? I
Yeah, you
mean,
said it. Did you not say
I
that?
get lost in it. I find it really
Yeah.
interesting. But to David's point, when he said, when you're downgrid, you're interested in a lot of things.
I
And
got
add
you.
to all that, if you want to throw some astrology into it, I'm a double Gemini. And so my mind is, Keats wrote, a busy mind in many places, true beauty of the soul embraces. So one day I can be absolutely fascinated by the ChangeGrid and have all kinds of visions and intentions and all that around it. And then the next day I can have that exact same energy around working on a piece on the harp or doing one of my upholstery projects or whatever it happens to be. So part of my challenge has always been that, um, um, choosing something and sticking with it all the way through it, I find that tedious and boring. So
That's me. I thought I was like the only one.
no, 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 no. And I can tell you, medication has helped greatly, but it is not fixed. It has not fixed anything. It has
Can
not
I ask you a
fixed anything.
question?
Please, yes.
Have you used the ChangeGrid to assess a potential new client?
Oh, yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've done it in several different ways. Do you have a particular client situation you're thinking about?
I do actually, yes.
Do tell. Do
I
tell.
do. Yeah, no, this is an insurance carrier in New York who was referred to me by a recruiter, and we connected before the pandemic, and things just were. He was very busy at the time, and now I pinged him about 2 weeks ago, and I quoted him some work yesterday.
Hmm.
So, but it's always interesting to me to see where an executive's head is at. Are they
Yes.
are they in a healthy space?
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think you've just um, given rise to two different kinds of ChangeGrids you could put together. So one ChangeGrid specifically for the client, where you would need to either create or co-create with them the workload that they would be doing or expected to do on this project. So you could kind of see what you're getting yourself into in on that particular side of things. So that's a little bit more of a needs assessment and
Right.
that. But the other thing you could certainly do is do a ChangeGrid that's not about them as much as this is about you working with them. So,
Interesting.
so let's say that you just put down things like um, dealing with their personality because you've learned enough about them in these early stages to kind of know what's going on. Um, um, I'm thinking about a particular client that I have, and I know that in order to work with this client, I pretty much have to be available all the time because you never can tell when a text message is going to come in. So if I was going to put that on a ChangeGrid, how would I rate my um, ability to manage that? And maybe it's more of a willingness issue. So do I need to just accept it? Do I need to work with it? So I think you could put together an activity list that's all about your own.
Let me share with you what I was thinking. I was thinking about doing one just about their key tasks and seeing what level of tension, all of those various levels of tension, those tasks, and the importance and
Absolutely.
various things, just to kind of, it's like, where is he really in control? Where is he out of control?
Yeah. And I would really encourage you to think about doing that kind of a ChangeGrid almost routinely. and positioning it as an added value sort of thing you do with the client as opposed to something you charge for. And the nice thing about that is that it's going to accomplish what you really want to accomplish as far as your depth of understanding of what's really going on with the client. But ultimately, other people in that organization are going to be getting involved, and that could open up the doors for a group profile.
Yeah.
And that you charge for, obviously. So,
That's a great question. Could we do a training series on that?
yeah, whenever you want. If you want that next, yeah, we don't. We
Yeah,
only have a
like
few of these little emotions to get out of the way, and we can move
yeah,
on.
because moving forward, I keep seeing all this research from CDC and other public health institutions about the post-pandemic and the anxiety with millennials who are, the bigger workforce right now. But then you have like frontline healthcare workers that are dealing with stress. A lot of them just quitting because they don't want to be vaccinated. They don't want mandated vaccination. So you have all these things I think are just going to boil over.
Yep.
And there's going to be, I think, the great need. We're seeing like a rise in domestic violence and all different kinds of things. I said, this is like off the chart stuff now.
Oh yeah. And they were even an article yesterday was talking about how people's driving habits, their thoughts around driving, their beliefs about themselves and what they can do when they're driving are also changing. Somehow or another, I didn't realize this, but did you guys know that apparently COVID has completely changed the rules around driving? So people do outrageous things. And um, 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 another article was talking about how they are putting flight attendants through some self-defense courses and more work about de-escalation because the behavior of airline passengers has just also gotten a little bit out of control post-pandemic.
Right.
So who knows? Yeah, things changed. Yeah, we can absolutely talk about using the ChangeGrid for those purposes. When I first put the ChangeGrid together and started using it in business, I did it as a needs assessment, and I positioned it in multiple places. So I could either do it at the level of working with a prospect so that I could show them this is what's going on in your organization and this is why. You need to do something, and then I would kind of do another one or reposition it then as here's what the actual workload is. Here's our action plan for how we're going to be developing the scope of work and executing on that scope of work. So, and then you could do it as a little periodic check-in to say, all right, we've done this, now we're going to be doing this. And so it's also a great tool for perpetuating the work, the plan of work.
Right.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
Yeah. When hey, again, I want to say that the reason why the ChangeGrid is so useful is not because the ChangeGrid is so useful. It's because everyone already has a ChangeGrid in their head. So rather than view it as being some external tool that managers could use or leaders could use, I want you to never forget that the ChangeGrid lives in everyone's head. And our little diagram and our little piece of software is just taking a moment to look at what's going on inside of their head. But it's always there. So when I'm talking about how it's always in play, it's always in play, not because it's some construct, some invention, but because it's already there.
Right.
You just have to decide to tap into that or use what's readily, what's always been there and always will be there.
That's what I like. That's why I really appreciate what David's asked, because it just seems to me the more professionals I speak to and they tell me about their working experience, and then when I talk to the executives, they seem to be like just unaware or disconnected from the fact of how they design their policies, their procedures, all these structural things. They seem to be disconnected with understanding that impacts behavior.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like just like it goes straight over their head, but then they're calling in the consultants to come and create some magic, or they're depending on technology.
Yep.
Like that's not going to change your you got to change the structure part first,
Right.
or at least consider it.
Yeah.
It's not just one thing. It's either or. It's both and. It's
That's
just
correct.
amazing how they just don't get it.
Well, and I think one thing we can talk about in greater detail when we do apply the change grid to that kind of an opportunity. I found myself a couple of days ago saying to one of my clients that I've been working with for years and years, I said to them, my advice is never going to change. And so you guys are in the same situation I'm in. We say the exact same things to our clients over and over and over again about how they work with people, how the culture in there. We keep giving everybody the same messages over and over and over. And so I said to the client, my advice is never going to change. The only question is, how many times are you going to pay me to hear me give you the exact same advice before you take the advice and do the work that needs to be done?
Mhm.
And they just kind of went quiet for a moment. And I said, you decide how much you are going to pay me before you actually do the work that needs to be done. I have no problem with you paying me another dozen times, but my advice is never going to change. So there you have it.
Nice.
We do need to finish off this little question about lust. The only one left is a very far in-grid person. And this is a quick one because we know that someone in the in-grid danger zone has a real issue when it comes to self-esteem. And as someone's self-esteem gets more and more and more, what word do I want to use?
Challenge.
Right. What happens to their wants? Do they even want anything?
Mm.
And see, that's part of the challenge is that they really aren't trying to make choices. They really aren't. They're settling for whatever it is they have. Some of them are in very dangerous sorts of dynamic situations, but even the people who have none of that going on, if you are that far in grid where you perceive yourself as having such a low level of ability that you can't even tackle any kind, if you really are living in here, your wants, your desires, they're virtually non-existent. All you really want is to survive for another day, and you're not under no grand threat. You just exist. People here don't really live. They just exist. And so is there a want? Is there a desire? I would say to you that developing a want is one of the first steps to get you out of that situation.
Mhm.
So here there is an absence of whatever those wants, those needs, those
So
desires.
that's the opposite of the
Here,
term that David used and on of expectation. They have no expectation.
zero expectations for themselves, for others. They live in a very tiny kind of a world, and there they are. So to me, it really is about if I can get them to want something, maybe I can get them to start moving.
Right.
Is that a power move?
Well, part of it, when you're this far in grid, it's almost it's more of an out grid maneuver, taking a risk, having whatever. It could also be an upgrid maneuver because you just need to move when you're here. And but it's not PowerPoint. It's not these
Oh, okay.
people. They don't view themselves. If you really talk about the PowerPoint and what you can actually develop here skill wise, it's almost like it becomes a bit of a superpower that you recognize that you are far, far greater than this physical body that you find yourself in, and this set of beliefs that, as strong as they may be, are still limiting in their compared to what you could be. They're not there yet. They're far from it. So
Okay.
any kind of a want, any kind of a choice, just something. What do you want? What change do you want? Again, they're unlikely to become our clients. We don't really find these people not because they don't exist. They might very well exist in great abundance, but they're not visible. They're the invisible population. In French, they'd be referred to as kidam. Kidam is the faceless person that we see all day, every day. We can even walk right past them, but they're invisible in many, many ways, and
Mhm.
maybe invisible even to themselves. So
Interesting.
they exist. There's plenty of them. They don't tend to become our clients. Okay, all right. With that, we will pick up next time around on, I believe, apathy is our next one on the list. So where does apathy live? So with that, thanks everybody for joining in. We'll talk again real soon. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Well.